Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're doing another book review for the ALA's Banned Books list of 2022. This one is a little more mainstream than some of the other books that have been on this list so far. John Green's Looking for Alaska. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lamai, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in the creativity of this community because you all are so good. I read some of the prompts, not all of them if there are too many, because bro, we could be here all night. The second thing is, if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, if you submit the first chapter and the cover page, they will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work, because once it's out there, it deserves to be seen for all of the hard work that you put into it. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they are also linked in the description below. You can get them anywhere that you get books, that you like getting books, including the library upon request. So there is that, and if you check them out, I hope you enjoy some of them. Bodymore 3 is coming out in October. So Joey's story is finishing. With that said, let's get into this. Tied for number 5 in 2022 with Perks of Being a Wallflower was Looking for Alaska by John Green with 55 challenges. And it was allegedly challenged for LGBT content and claimed to be sexually explicit. So I'm going to come right out the gate and say there was no LGBT content in this. So honestly, that descriptor there kind of made me even more questioning of this list than previously. Like, Lawn Boy made me question this before, but now I'm just like, it's either the parents just randomly ticking things that they haven't read and then just ticking boxes, or the ALA is dubious. And at this point, I think the ALA is just as dubious as what parents are, because there is none of that in here. But if you want to claim some kind of bias, then how do you do that? You put a certain marker on everything, because there was no LGBT content in this book, period. I'll get to the one spot where you could pretend if you squinted your eyes, but no. And if you're wondering where A Song of Mist and Fury is, because that was number 10, tied for number 10, I am, in fact, dragging my feet on doing that book, because it was 600 pages, bro. I have so many notes. So we're doing John Green this week, and like at some point before the end of the ALA books, we'll get to Song of Mist and Fury. But that day is not today. Okay, when getting into this, I'd never actually read any John Green before. I'd never seen any John Green movies. It was just, I'd never been interested, so I didn't know what to expect in here, other than I heard people say that Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl was kind of an anti-John Green, and so I was expecting depression and attempts at, like, meaning from depression, since Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl was like, here's depression, but also saying that it's all pointless and you get nothing out of this. So that's what I went in with this expecting. The prologue opens with a group of kids planning to do a prank around a campsite. Alaska's there, and she interrupts to say that it was her idea, as the narrator claims that it was his. Now it's time to wreak a little havoc. The book then opens with a section called Before, and starts at 136 days before a vague event. We're met with Miles, the narrator, going off to boarding school at the end of summer, but first his parents insist on throwing him a going away party. He invites a ton of people, none of which come. I have been there. No, it was not a going away party. It was just a birthday party, and I was in like 6th grade and nobody came. Anyway, only 2 people from his class come, a loser girl and her boyfriend. Over the summer, they were involved in a Jesus Christ Superstar production that Miles doesn't want to talk about because he doesn't know what it is and he really doesn't care. They eventually leave. He wants to turn on the TV and his parents are expecting him to be sad, but he's not. What we're going to learn is that in general, Miles is a very apathetic main character. He really doesn't care about like anything. His parents are like, "Is this why you want to go away to school? Because you don't have friends?" And Miles says, quote, "So this guy, Francois Rabelais, he was a poet, and his last words were, 'I go to seek a great perhaps.' That's why I'm going, so that I don't have to wait until I die to start seeking the great perhaps." So he's both apathetic but also chasing a dream. 128 days before, now we go off to Culver Creek Preparatory School in Alabama. How we get from Florida to Alabama, I'm not entirely sure. His parents help him move in. It's really hot. He's completely unemotional and unattached, and he just wants his parents to leave. Quote, "God will miss you," Mom said suddenly, stepping through the minefield of suitcases to get to the bed. I stood and hugged her. My dad walked over too, and we formed a sort of huddle. It was too hot, and we were too sweaty for the hug to last terribly long. I knew that I ought to cry, but I'd lived with my parents for 16 years, and a trial separation seemed overdue. "I love you," they both blurted out simultaneously. It needed to be said, but words made the whole thing horribly uncomfortable, like watching your grandparents kiss. "I love you too. I'll call you every Sunday." Our room had no phone lines, but my parents had requested I be placed in a room near one of the Carver Creek's 5 payphones. They hugged me again, Mom, then Dad, and it was over. Out the back window, I watched them drive the winding road off campus. I should have felt a gooey, sentimental sadness, perhaps, but mostly, I just wanted to cool off. So I grabbed one of the desk chairs and sat down outside my door in the shade of the overhanging eaves, waiting for a breeze that never arrived. After his parents are gone, he wanders around, hoping that somebody will talk to him, but no one does. He goes back to his room to lay in his bed and laments the loneliness. Talking about how hot it is and how his dorm does not have an air conditioner somehow. Even though it's a private school in Alabama, let me know if this is normal for you. Whatever. That's where we are. Miles then goes to take a shower to cool off, and when he comes back, his roommate is there. Hello! Quote, "When I opened the bathroom door after my shower, a towel wrapped around my waist, I saw a short, muscular guy with a shock of brown hair. He was hauling a gigantic army green duffel bag through the door of my room. He stood 5 feet nothing, but he was well built like a scale model of Adonis, and with him arrived the stink of stale cigarette smoke. Great, I thought. I'm meeting my roommate, naked. He heaved the duffel into the room, closed the door, and walked over to me. "I'm Chip Martin," he announced in a deep voice, the voice of a radio DJ. We learned that Chip is also studied in poetry, just like Miles is studied in People's Last Words. And if I didn't say that before, Miles is studied in People's Last Words. Chip has also memorized the world map and just goes off naming countries as he looks at the map that Miles already has put up. Miles is impressed, and Chip asks Miles what his skill is. Miles says he names the last words of dead people. He's so quirky. I was reading this part and I was like, oh my gosh, this feels so perfectly quirky for like a teenager. I remember writing stuff as a teenager. I remember going for my quirky characters in a completely different way than I do them now. And there are parts in this that I was like, okay, I can see the relevancy for this for teenagers where they're like edgy and special. And it's John Green. Like, this is not adult writing, but we're not trying to appeal to adults. We're trying to appeal to I'm 14 and I'm deep, and this is it. Like, it reminded me of That Darn Cat with, do you remember that movie? It was a Disney movie forever ago with a girl that like was it a cat that she found? And the cat like helped her stumble into a murder scene or something. But she was like wearing black at the beginning of that movie, and her mother asked her about it. She's like, "Black is the color of my soul." That's what it feels like. We're here right now. So Chip tells Miles that he's not a cool kid here. He's a poor kid. So if Miles came over here thinking that he'd be a cool kid too because of his placement in public school, then they better not be seen together, or else Miles is going to catch the uncool. After moving a beat-up couch into the dorm, Chip says that it's time to go and get cigarettes, and he heads out down the hall to Alaska's room because that's where he's going to buy cigarettes from. Alaska is another student somehow. She is also the ciggy dealer. When they get there, she's immediately telling Chip of a story that happened over the summer when she was hanging out with this boy named Justin watching TV when the boy grabbed her boob, and she needed to figure out how to get him to let go, and also couldn't wait to tell Chip and Takumi about whatever happened. Miles admires how hot Alaska is, and Chip introduces the two of them. Alaska immediately goes over and pulls Miles' pants down, saying that those are the biggest pants she's ever seen in Alabama. He pulls them back up, saying that he likes them baggy. After buying cigarettes, Alaska is going to go find Takumi and then meet them out at the lake. Chip and Miles go out to the lake, where Miles tries smoking, but stops after he gets sick after one puff. Then Chip's warning Miles about the swan on the lake. Then Chip is warning Miles about this swan that the resident advisor named Eagle put there in order to keep the kids away from the lake. I assume because swans can be pretty intense if you bug them, especially if they're nesting. But is there only one swan there? I have to ask because, like, we've got a swan lake here. So many swans. High double-digit swans to the point that they, like, sell them off every so often because there are so many swans that just... they're there. After smoking for a bit, Chip gets up to go and look for his girlfriend, and Miles stays behind to try smoking again when Alaska shows up to ask him to throw her some dead guy phrases. Alaska pulls out a more obscure book reference and asks Miles if he knows what the last words in that book are, and he says no, he doesn't, but then he is super impressed by what she shares, and he wants to go and get a copy of that book himself so that he can read it. We know what's actually happening in the story. Miles is super into Alaska, thinks that she's hot, and so he is going to do whatever he's got to do to get her attention. We know this. Quote, "And now is as good a time as any to say how beautiful she was. In the dark beside me, she smelled of sweat and sunshine and vanilla, and on that thin moon night, I could see little more than her silhouette, except for when she smoked, when the burning cherry of the cigarette washed her face in pale red light. But even in the dark, I could see her eyes, fierce emeralds. She had the kind of eyes that predisposed you to supporting her every endeavor. And not just beauty, but hot, too. With her breasts straining against the tight tank top, her curved legs swinging back and forth beneath the swing flip-flops dangling from her electric blue painted toes. And it was right then, between when I asked about the labyrinth and when she answered me, and I realized the importance of curves, of the thousands of places where girls' bodies ease from one place to another, from arc of the foot to ankle of the calf, from calf to hip to waist to breast to ski slope nose to the forehead to the shoulder to the concave arch of the back to the butt to the etc. I've noticed curves before, of course, but I never quite apprehended their significance. So what I actually liked about this is just like how obviously male teenager the perspective is, where he's like, I'm looking at this chick, she is so hot, I appreciate all of the shapes of this female's body. I'm like, yeah, accurate. She says that she hasn't read all of the books in her room, but she plans to every summer, and she always buys more books as they look interesting. She calls her shelves life's library. The two of them keep talking, exchanging compliments on being cute, and Alaska says that she'll get Miles a girlfriend if he can figure out how to escape the mysterious labyrinth, which is kind of a reference to life. Then she says, do you ever feel scared of walking in the dark and you just run home? After that, she grabs his hand, says run, and they escape into the dorms. 127 days before, the next day, Miles meets the Eagle, who I think is a resident advisor, but again, he kind of does more than residentiary advisor stuff, so it's kind of confusing exactly what Eagle is supposed to be. Anyway, he gives him a warning to not get in trouble, and then Miles is asking Chip about Alaska as if he's got a chance. They go to the cafeteria to eat, and he mentions how here everything is deep fried, and he's being introduced to the South's obsession with deep fried food. He meets Takumi at lunch, and the group is gossiping about some people who got expelled for being found in bed together last semester. Everyone wants to know who ratted them out. Later, Miles is back in his room alone as Chip goes for a smoke and doesn't invite him. So, Miles reads The Final Days instead, a book about Richard Nixon and Watergate. Kind of an interesting choice. There's no context for that. It's just, oh, I guess that's just what Miles likes to read. Miles passes out in his underwear and then wakes up in the middle of the night with a bunch of people hanging over him, pulling him out of bed to take him to a lake, tie his legs together, and push him in. No, it's not attempted murder. It is just hazing. Quote, sinking. But instead of feeling panic or anything else, I realized, please, guys, don't. weren't terrible last words, but then the great miracle of the human species, our buoyancy, came through, and as I felt myself floating toward the surface, I twisted and turned as best as I could so that the warm night air hit my nose first. And I breathed. I wasn't dead, and I wasn't going to die. He eventually gets himself to the shore and there's a towel. He gets the tape off and he goes to see Alaska for some reason, probably because he doesn't want to see the Colonel right now. Colonel is the nickname for Chip. When he shows up saying that he almost died, he's like, quote, "I just looked at her blankly, unsure even of what to ask. Give me a break," she said. "Come on, you know what? There are people with real problems. I've got real problems. Mommy ain't here, so buck up, big boy." It was just attempted murder. Miles leaves without saying anything else. Clearly, he's not getting anywhere. He obviously is upset, and that's, absolutely fair. He goes back to his room and showers and tells the Colonel what happened. The Colonel is like, "They were just supposed to tease you, not almost drown you. What the hell? We're gonna have to get them back for this." Miles wants to tell on them, but Colonel talks him out of being a narc because nobody needs to be a narc around here. Like, you don't want that reputation. Being a narc is how you get stabbed. Miles then determines that this isn't so bad of a thing after all. Quote, "I went to bed wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and socks. No matter how miserably hot it got, I resolved that I would sleep in my clothes every night at the creek, feeling, probably for the first time in my life, the fear and excitement of living in a place where you never know what's going to happen or when." So his apathy has been cured. All he needed was an almost death experience, being thrown in a lake, being alone, not narking. Gang wars. That's how you bring life back to life. 126 days before, the guys who abducted Miles last night also peed in the Colonel's shoes. Oh, he mad. Miles' first class is French, and he realizes that this is way more advanced than what he was used to and what he was expecting, despite having been doing French in public school, and he thinks that he might actually fail his class because he is not prepared. We skip through the day until world religion class when he sits down and Chip and Takumi both come in and sit beside him, saying that Alaska is pissed off about what happened to Miles last night. Miles is like, "That's weird, because when I went to her room last night to tell her what happened to me, she didn't freaking care." The teacher comes in and tells all the kids that they're gonna have to listen to him talk and do the work. Chip makes Miles a diagram of the classroom saying, "Show me which of these kids in this class were the ones that pushed you in the lake, and we'll deal with them accordingly." Turns out that Miles is really interested in the world religion class, but that might be in part because he's possibly getting answers for Alaska's question, and we know how hot he is for Alaska. He learns more about the people who took him last night, and he spends his free period learning about mythologies, which are described as a traditional story that tells you something about people and their worldview and what they hold sacred. After school, Miles is in his dorm reading more about religion until he falls asleep. Alaska wakes up and teases him and then tells him to toughen up if he's going to be around here. We're reminded that Miles thinks Alaska is cute, and he tells himself, "You don't need to like a girl who treats you like you're a 10. You already got a mom." Will that be romance with Alaska, or is he just like feeling saucy for this hottie with a body? 122 days before, 1 week after classes have started, Miles walks in on the Colonel ironing a pink button-up shirt. He's doing this because Takumi doesn't know how to iron, and Alaska refuses to because, quote, "You're not going to impose a patriarchal paradigm on me," end quote. So Alaska is doomed. Alaska is doomed. The shirt is being ironed specifically because Chip is supposed to go to an opera with his girlfriend and her family. But when she shows up, Miles immediately clocks her as a bitch. Chip and Sarah, the girlfriend, fight over her parents and how they don't like Chip at all, and how they're gonna be late if they don't leave now, and the shirt isn't even ironed, and so then Chip antagonizes Sarah about her parents, and he says that he's not freaking going. Never mind, he's just not going. Bro, you already half ironed your shirt. Just go the rest of the distance. Why are you even with this chick? Sarah obviously gets mad and is like, fine, don't go. Bye, and then leaves. It's these kinds of relationships that I just don't get why they're even seeing each other, because there's such hatred and antagonism and dislike between each other that it's just like, You look like you hate each other and have nothing in common, so like why are you even, how did this happen? And why do you continue? After a quick drink of vodka and milk that Chip calls ambrosia, the hall phone goes off and it's Sarah calling for Chip. Shortly after that, he takes the phone and then he says, "Screw you too," and comes back into the room. Then it looks like they're just gonna hang out in the dorm tonight instead of doing anything, so 110 days before, Miles brags about how keeping up with his classes has been easier than he expected, and he's better than his classmates because he actually reads since he doesn't have any friends while they all stand out in the quad getting sunburned, talking to each other. Like, what kind of losers keep friends? Am I right? We're not losers around here, okay? In world religion class, Miles is so busy looking out the window that his teacher gets offended and sends him out of the class. Mild, you could say that it was a mild overreaction. Alaska says that it's BS and also gets herself kicked out of class, so then the two of them just go away. Apparently, paying the dues for a private school is not enough to keep you from getting kicked out of class just for looking out the window while your teacher is talking. I wonder what he would do to me for drawing while I listen and write notes. I've been there before. Not with a private school teacher. I was freaking in statistics class in college. And this dude had to be ex-mafia. I swear, he had like a pressed pinstripe suit, the slicked back hair, rings on every finger. He was drawing all of the diagrams and statistics in the terms of like blood with little blood droppies. I remember the blood droppies. And it was like, here's a car accident, and here is how you lie in court about statistics so that you're technically not lying, but they're making assumptions based on you not putting a 0 on your chart, and so it's not lying and you can get away with more stuff. And also, he noticed that I was drawing in the middle of class, and he was like, "And some people just don't think this is important." And he just had his laser eyes on me and my sister while we were just sitting there. And it was like, bro, we're listening. Some of us just do things while we listen to help improve the listening. Needless to say, I didn't want to get into a car accident. That man was probably under witness protection in Eagle River. I'm just saying. You know what? Going forward, I'm just imagining Miles' world religion teacher to be that guy. He's gonna be, forget about it. After everyone gets out of class, they go into the forest and smoke together and talk some, and then they rap because apparently Alaska and all of her friends do free form rapping, and it's so cringy. Alaska is smoking fast through her cigarettes. The chapter ends with Miles asking why Alaska smokes her cigarettes so fast that she goes, quote, "Y'all smoke to enjoy it. I smoke to die." Not gonna lie, the whole scene is hilariously edgy, like a parody. I don't know if that's what John was going for, but it was funny. 109 days before, the next day, Chip and Miles are talking about sports at the school and how the basketball team sucks, but they at least have air conditioning in the gym, so he always goes to watch the games to at least get some air conditioning. They're so bad that typically, the team is so bad that typically the only time that they win is when their team goes up against the deaf and blind school every year. They go to the game against a Christian school that eventually is gonna wipe the floor with them. However, not before Chip makes it clear to Kevin that there is no truce. Kevin is the guy that dumped Miles in the lake and may or may not have peed in his shoes. They agree that if Miles knows the words of some dead president, then there is no truce, and that's exactly what happens. Chip eventually gets them kicked out of the game for being too distracting as he shouts at the players, and in World's religion class, Miles is told by his teacher to be present whenever he is there. No daydreaming, no looking out the window, no thinking of freedom. That's not what world religion is about. That is the point of Buddhism. Be present in the classroom. 101 days before. It's October now, and they're going to be studying for a calculus exam. Alaska drives a bunch of them to McDonald's to smoke and eat and study, and there's this Russian girl named Laura who's there, quote, as Alaska zipped through something obvious about linear equations. Stoner baller Hank Walston said, wait, I don't get it. That's because you have 8 functioning brain cells. Studies show that marijuana is better for your health than those cigarettes, Hank said. Alaska swallowed a mouthful of French fries, took a drag on her cigarette, and blew her smoke at Hank. I may die young, she said, but at least I'll die smart. Now, back to tangents. Alaska, why? Well, she's like, I picked Alaska because you know how dark it is in the wintertime? That's how dark it is in my soul. The sun never comes up for 3 months. 100 days before, Miles just got his calculus test back and he got a B+. He asks Alaska how she got her name, and Alaska launches into the story, quote, always comes up eventually. All right, so my mom was something of a hippie when I was a kid. You know, wore oversized sweaters, she knitted herself, smoked a lot of pot, etc. And my dad was a real Republican type. And so, when I was born, my mom wanted to name me Harmony Springs Young, and my dad wanted to name me Mary Frances Young. As she talked, she bobbed her head back and forth to the MTV music, even though the song was the kind of manufactured pop ballad that she professed to hate. So instead of naming me Harmony or Mary, they agreed to let me decide. So when I was little, they called me Mary. I mean, they called me Sweetie or whatever, but like on school forms and stuff, they wrote Mary Young. And when my 7th birthday, and then on my 7th birthday, my present was that I got to pick my name. Cool, huh? So I spent the whole day looking at my dad's globe for a cool name. And so my first choice was Chad, like the country in Africa, but then my dad said that that was a boy's name, so I picked Alaska. I just think it's funny that this can go off on the hippie stereotype, but then also show the uncaring nature of the author here to not even bother with what a stereotypical Republican means. It's just like, you know the type. They're just there. Alaska then adds, Alaska says, quote, well, later I found out what it means. It's from the Aleut word, Aliaska. It means that which the sea breaks against, and I love that. But at the time, I just saw Alaska up there, and it was big, just like I want to be, and it was damn far away from Vine Station, Alabama, just like I wanted to be. Miles is thinking about kissing Alaska right then when she says, quote, Jesus, I'm not going to be one of those people who sits around talking about what they're going to do. I'm just going to do it. Imagining the future is a kind of nostalgia. You spend your whole life stuck in the labyrinth thinking about how you'll make the escape one day and how awesome it'll be, and imagining that future keeps you going, but you never do it. You just use the future to escape the present. Then she mimics the TV voice of the commercial on television like a random girl, and Miles is just like, I'm confused. I don't understand you sometimes, Alaska. And she goes, you never get me. That's the whole point. You know, I could have done with just more Alaska. Just like, she is 14 and deep, okay? 99 days before. Chip and Miles are reading in their dorms, run out of cigarettes, go to Alaska's room, go outside to smoke. An eagle comes out, busts them. Alaska says, sometimes you lose the battle, but we will win the war. 98 days before. Because they were caught smoking, they're going to be judged by a jury of their peers and the eagle on what should happen to them. Alaska's gotten into trouble so many times before for smoking, which makes me wonder why they aren't even being at least a little bit more careful, because obviously she knows what's at stake. I mean, clearly you could also say she just doesn't care, but so then just get rid of her. Why is the school putting up with this? Eventually, Chip and Alaska get 10 work hours in the kitchen and 1 call away from their homes being called, so the next time that they get caught, it's game over. Takumi and Miles don't get punished since all they did was watch the smoking happen. 89 days before. Alaska approaches Miles, saying that they found Miles a girlfriend. Now, she just has to see if the both of them like each other. Though that doesn't really make sense, because Alaska also immediately says that the girl's already been thinking of Miles sexually, so she knows that this girl is into Miles. And it's the Russian girl that did the calculus studies with them as a group. Quote, you know that girl in our pre-calc class? Alaska said. Soft voice says these, not this. You know that girl? Yeah, Laura. She sat on my lap on the way to McDonald's. Right, I know. And she liked you. You thought that she was quietly discussing pre-calc when she was clearly talking about having hot sex with you, which is why you need me. She has great breasts, the colonel said without looking up from the whale. Do not objectify women's bodies, Alaska shouted. Alaska is gonna set Miles up on a date with the Russian beauty for Friday night. You know that he has got it made. 87 days before. Triple date time. Alaska's boyfriend has come over and he looks like a rugged catalog model. She jumps on Jake that's her boyfriend, and kisses him messily. They go to a basketball game where Alaska tells Miles to sit next to her, and he's jealous of Jake the whole time, not wanting to replace him, but wanting to be him for Alaska. And then Chip taunts the opponent basketball team until they get kicked out. He's saying stuff like Takumi slept with your girlfriend and all that kind of stuff. On the way out of the gym, Miles gets hit in the face with a basketball and starts vomiting all over his date. He gets a concussion and is taken home by Chip, who keeps an eye on him throughout the night to make sure that he doesn't go into a coma. Once Miles comes to, Chip tells him that Sarah finally dumped him, accusing him of having slept with Alaska. Everybody is avoiding everyone after the disaster of a date that they all went on at that basketball game. Chip's drinking alone in his room, and it's raining nonstop. Alaska's avoiding everyone until finally Miles catches her in the cafeteria, and even then, she doesn't want to talk to him, so she gets up and just walks away. Continuing on, Chip feels better about things. In the world religion class, they discuss how Jesus was special. In the time of God's having sons, he was a peasant, a Jew, a nobody in an empire of exclusively somebodies. And he was the son of the almighty God of Abraham and Moses. Quote, that God's son was not an emperor, not even a trained rabbi, a peasant and a Jew, and a nobody like you. While the Buddha was special because he abandoned his wealth and noble birth to seek enlightenment, Jesus was special because he lacked wealth and noble birth, but inherited the ultimate nobility. King of Kings. Class over. You can pick up a copy of your final exam on the way out. Stay dry. And that's when they're given the final exam question. What is the most important question human beings must answer? Choose your question wisely and then examine how Islam, Buddhism, and Christianity attempt to answer it. As Chip and Miles are leaving class, Alaska comes running at them, saying the jerks flooded her room and ruined her books. All three of them are now like, oh, those jerks and Kevin, they're gonna freaking pay. At 67 days before, they're talking about getting back at the other kids for flooding Alaska's room. Takumi takes Miles to the smoking spot, and they stop short, him saying that it's possibly compromised because Alaska's kind of a rat, and she's the one that ratted out those kids who got expelled before because she ratted on them for something else. She was given the opportunity to either tell Eagle what she knew or go home, and so she told on them. And no one suspected her because they all trusted her. Better to keep it from Chip, though, because he takes loyalty, like, really seriously. Unfortunately, that's not something that comes into this. Like, we get some random things sort of inserted into this that never actually turn into something, which is kind of a trend I'm noticing in a lot of books. They kind of introduce ideas and then just like waste time until the big event happens, and earlier things just don't tie in later. Miles determines Chip and Alaska took the fault for him at jury before, so he would know what to do when the time came for him to do the same. 58 days before, Alaska is hanging out with Miles playing video games while he reads. He lays on his bed, she comes over and sits next to him, and he thinks about how close they are. Touching. She asks him to stay over for the holiday break and gives reasons why. He says that he'll talk to his mom. She goes back to gaming and he comes with her. She lays her head in his lap and he's thinking about the appropriate times to get an erection. Alaska says that she's not flirting, she's just tired. Later, Miles calls his mom and works out that he can stay at school over winter break. He runs into Chip, who says that Sarah came looking for him and said, I love you, and then he ran because saying I love you is the gateway drug to breaking up. Very clearly, you cannot break up unless you are together. He's not wrong. Miles feels bad about not wanting to go home for Thanksgiving since, his mom had previously been like, well, there's a big turkey waiting for you if you do decide to come. But when he calls his mom, it's immediately like, bro, we got tickets. We're going to Europe since you're staying in Alabama. Booyah! Single parent life. His parents being happy kind of makes him depressed, so he hangs up and then goes to hang out with Alaska, and he asks her why she doesn't go home for the holidays, and she says, because home is full of ghosts and I'm scared of them. 52 days before, everyone's gone away for Thanksgiving, and Miles and Alaska meet in the woods to drink wine and eat strawberries and hang out and talk. Alaska says it's not life or death, the labyrinth, it's suffering. Doing wrong and having wrong things happen to you. That's the problem. Bolivar was talking about pain, not about living or dying. How do you get out of the labyrinth of suffering? Miles asks what's wrong, and Alaska says nothing's wrong, but there's always suffering. Pudge, homework, or malaria, or having a boyfriend who lives far away when there's a good-looking boy lying next to you. Suffering is universal. It's the one thing Buddhists, Christians, and Muslims all worry about. Miles keeps looking at her, and Alaska's hand is on his leg, he's thinking about kissing her, and Alaska says, "Shh, don't ruin it." 51 days before, the two of them sneak into Kevin's room for some recon and discover how to hit him the hardest with the pranks. They discover that Kevin cares about his hair, so they're gonna go after that. As Alaska climbs out the window, Miles watches her booty. 49 days before. Now they're running around the dorms looking for porn and drinking people's hidden liquor, because there is apparently a lot of liquor in this dormitory. Once they find some porn videos, Alaska and Miles go to the TV room to watch them together. They're watching the videos, and Alaska complains that it objectifies and abuses women. It's not sex or anything special, it's just a penis and a vagina smashing together, and the woman is totally abused in this situation. Alaska lays down. Miles follows, touches the small of her back, asking her what's wrong, but Alaska is already passed out. Miles wants to lay next to her, but doesn't, and just leaves the room. 47 days before. Chip shows up at school and invites Alaska and Miles to his house for Thanksgiving. They have a good time, even though initially they're very nervous. Chip is like, "Now that you've seen my poverty, you get why I hate the rich?" And Miles is like, "Yeah." He then shares a bed with Alaska while Chip sleeps in a tent out back because the house is too small to house all of them. Day 46, it's Thanksgiving food, and everybody is saying thank you and what they're grateful for. This feels like a home to Miles, and the best Thanksgiving that he's had in a while, because people are actually happy to be together. Day 44, the crew goes to get alcohol and cigarettes from a nearby place that's making a killing by selling them to the kids somehow. They go home. Miles is working on an essay when Alaska comes in for a visit and is crying. She says that she told Chip about the narking and he's mad and doesn't trust her, which is fair, but also, why? I have no family. Alaska's scared that she'll ruin everything, and then says that Miles only likes the crazy girl who makes him laugh, shows him porn, and gets him wine, not the crazy, sullen bitch. Miles is like, true, that's true. Come back when you're happy, Alaska. Christmas comes around, and Miles goes home and is grateful for his family because his parents missed him, and now he's spending his time doing things with them because they missed him and he missed them, and all is happy, and he is happy for his family again. 8 days before. Miles, Alaska, and Chip are talking about doing a pre-prank to get Kevin and distract Eagle. Alaska and Chip are planning this pre-prank. Miles isn't invited, so he's getting kind of jealous. 4 days before the event. Chip and Alaska are always together for the pre-prank, and Miles is kind of irritated by it now. He was dealing with it before, but freaking not anymore, bro. Though he is focusing on finishing his finals, he explains the answer to the world religion class. Quote, "My answer to the question was straightforward enough, really. Most Christians and Muslims believe in a heaven and a hell, though there's a lot of disagreement within both religions over what exactly will get you into the afterlife or the other. Will get you into one afterlife or the other. Buddhists are more complicated because of the Buddha's doctrine of anatta, which basically says that people don't have eternal souls. Instead, they have a bundle of energy, and that bundle of energy is transitory, migrating from one body to another, reincarnating endlessly until it eventually reaches enlightenment." 3 days before. All the prep work for the pre-prank is done, and we get the scene from the prologue at the beginning. It goes off, and Miles and Takumi set off fireworks all over campus to distract the Eagle. A swan attacks Miles. Meanwhile, Laura, the Russian girl, slips into Kevin's place and puts blue hair dye in his shampoo, while Chip and Alaska go into the dean's office to get school papers and send off Kevin and his crew's grades to their parents to show that they are failing. Alaska grabs way more than she was supposed to, and Chip curses her because that's going to narrow down the potential suspects, since the more people they send cards to, the fewer people it could be. 2 days before. They're all hanging out and doing a cringy rap battle. Quote, "We're sitting in the barn and the sun's going down. When I was a kid at Burger King, I wore a crown. Dude, I can't rhyme for shit, so I'll make my boy Takumi rip it." Takumi took over without pausing. "Damn, Pudge, I'm not sure I'm quite ready, but like Nightmare on Elm Street's Freddy, I've already got the goods to rip shit up. Last night, I drank wine. It was like a hiccup. The Colonel's beats are sick like malaria. When I rock the mic, the ladies suffer hysteria. I represent Japan as well as Birmingham. When I was a kid, they called me Yellow Man, but I ain't ashamed of my skin color, and neither are the countless bitches that call me lover. Alaska jumps in. Oh, shit, did you just diss my feminine gender? I'll pummel your ass, then stick you in a blender. You think I like Tori and Annie so I can't rhyme, but I got flows like Ghostbusters got slime. Objectify women and it's fucking on. You'll be dead and gone like ancient Babylon. Takumi picks it up again. If my eyes offend me, I will pluck it out. I got props for girls like old men got gout. Oh shit, now my rhyming got all whack. Laura, help me out and pick up the slack. Laura rhymed quietly and nervously, and with even more flagrant disregard for the beat than me. My name's Laura, and I'm from Romania. This is pretty hard. I once visited Albania. I love riding in Alaska's geo. My two best vowels in English are EO. I'm not so good with the little I's, but they make me sound cosmopolitan, right? Oh, Takumi, I think I'm done. End this game with some fun. I drop bombs like Hiroshima, or better yet, Nagasaki. When girls hear me flow, they think that I'm Rocky. To represent my homeland, I still drink sake. The kids don't get rhyme, and so sometimes they mock me. My build ain't small, but I wouldn't call it stocky. Then again, unlike Pudge, I'm not super gawky. I'm the fucking Fox, and this is my crew. Our freestyle infused with funk like gym shoes, and we're out! Again, I'm just like, you know what? That's cringy enough. I could see teenagers doing that. Give this a couple of years and they'll be putting that on TikTok. Alaska then says that they should all play best day, worst day. For some reason, like, this is a really stupid game. And Alaska's depressed, so she's like, okay, let's play the best day, worst day, where we all just talk about what our best days are and about our worst days, and she is, like, sloshed. Miles explains that one of his worst days ever was the day he became apathetic, and he had to go to gym class in clothing a classmate peed on, and the gym teacher wouldn't listen when he said that his clothes were peed on. Alaska shares the worst day of her life, where her mom had a brain aneurysm when she was 6 years old, and she was so scared that she didn't know what to do, so she just sat on the floor and watched her mom convulse until she went quiet. Then her dad got home and was like, "Why wouldn't you call the hospital, you 6-year-old?" And by then, mom was already dead. The only thing with this is that it made me go, so she got her name after her mom died? Unless she's making the story up, because she said, I mean, we don't know. She didn't say that her mom was there when she was 7, but like, if her mom wasn't there anymore, Dad didn't need to switch the name from Mary, because he could have just continued calling her Mary. That was the name that he wanted for her anyway. Small things, but that's something that I questioned when this came up. Anyway, as you'd imagine, this game is a total buzzkill. I don't know why you would play the worst days of your life game, especially while drunk, especially while moping, but here we are. They all drink until they go to sleep, and Miles climbs into bed with Laura, and they kiss and make out, and he asks her to be his girlfriend, and then they fall asleep together. One day before they're drinking, Alaska is super drinking. She says that she's an unhappy person. This is just like, okay, let's go. They check in with Eagle to see if he's suspicious of any of them for the prank that happened with the fireworks. He is not. And so then they go about their day. Miles brags about sleeping for 18 to 24 hours that day because it was a long day. The last day before the event, Kevin and the gang show up. Blue hair, successful prank die, and he wants to call a truce. Chip says, hey, why don't you wait a bit? The trouble isn't over yet, Kev. So Kevin walks out. Then Miles is spending the afternoon with Laura. They go to the video room to watch the Brady Bunch, where Laura then asks Miles if he's ever had a blowjob. He's so turned on by her Romanian accent and the question, and he tells her no, that he is not. Then his dick is the first one that she's ever seen. Laura tries giving him head, but she isn't sure how to do it, and she's just kind of sitting there with his dick in her mouth until they decide that, you know what, they're gonna go and ask Alaska for help. Alaska is then, would you call it kind enough, to give a tube of toothpaste head in order to show Laura what she needs to do. And so then they go back to the room and Laura gives Miles the blowjob and then they study. Miles gets frustrated trying to talk to Laura since their communication is difficult with the accent communication barrier. And so then he finally just leaves to go talk to Alaska and Chip about the blowjob. Alaska's like, I'd give you a BJ if I wasn't so attached to my boyfriend Jake. That night, he eats pretzels while Alaska and Chip drink alcohol to celebrate. Alaska asks Miles if the game Truth or Dare is played out or cool, and then he says that he's never played it. So Alaska's like, all right, we're playing. So there's been this, I feel like, this trend, because it happened in at least 2 or 3 books. One was The Pawn and the Puppet. I can't remember what the other one was, where it's just, they did this in Survive the Night too, where it was just like sitting there answering questions as like a means to express exposition, but it just doesn't work for me in most situations because it is so forced and it doesn't make any sense where it's coming from. It's just kind of there to exposit. Anyway, Miles picks Dare. Alaska says, hook up with me, and it immediately happens because that's obviously what was going to happen with a game of Truth or Dare. They're making out, and this girl is freaking getting ready to crash her life, burn, no survivors. She passes out before they go too far, and when Miles and Chip wake up, she's gone because of a phone call. Then she comes storming back in, slams the door, sobbing, and things escalate very quickly. She's demanding that they help her. She keeps making a mess of everybody's lives, and then they need to get rid of Eagle so that she can get out of there. Chip tells her that they will distract him, but she needs to drive slow with the lights off. They know that she's drunk, but they don't bother to tell her, don't drive, you're drunk. Miles then grabs the extra firecrackers so that he can distract Eagle. Now we are in the after event. Miles and Chip are woken up by Eagle and a call to the gym, and they think it's because of the religious studies teacher dying because everyone's kind of in a somber mood. But once everybody has gathered, it comes out that last night Alaska was in an accident and is now dead. This is after all that Miles could think about after he woke up was kissing Alaska again. Everyone is sobbing, breaking down. Chip is screaming at the sky because why, God, why? No one is dealing very well with this. Apparently everybody was friends with Alaska, or at least a lot closer. 2 days after, Miles calls his parents to tell them what happened. Once he's done on the phone, he thinks, quote, all right, I felt paralyzed into silence, terrorized. What was I so afraid of anyway? The thing had happened. She was dead. She was warm and soft against my skin, my tongue in her mouth, and she was laughing, trying to teach me, make me better, promising to be continued. And now she was colder by the hour, more dead with every breath that I took. I thought, that is the fear. I have lost something important and I cannot find it, and I need it. It is like if someone lost his glasses and went out to the glasses store and they told them that the world had run out of glasses and that he would just have to do without. So like, is Miles more upset that he just didn't get to have sex with Alaska, or that was the only time he would ever kiss Alaska? That is all that he is upset with right now? Miles, you're a freaking psycho. As everybody around here is like crying and sobbing and mourning the death of Alaska, he's just like, I didn't get to sleep with her though. Then there's more mourning by all of the students, which is fair. But at this point, we're only 60% into the book, and I was hoping that we didn't have to spend like 40% more of the book with all of the kids just crying the whole time. Quote, with morning came visitors. An hour after the colonel left, resident stoner Hank Walston dropped by to offer me some weed, which I graciously turned down. Hank hugged me and said, at least it was instant. At least there wasn't any pain. I knew that he was only trying to help, but he didn't get it. There was pain, a dull, endless pain in my gut that wouldn't go away even when I knelt on the stingingly frozen tile of the bathroom, dry heaving. And what is an instant death anyway? How long is an instant? Is it 1 second? 10? The pain of those seconds must have been awful as her heart burst and her lungs collapsed and there was no air and no blood in her brain and only raw panic. What the hell is an instant? Nothing is instant. Instant rice takes 5 minutes, instant pudding an hour. I doubt that an instant of blinding pain feels particularly instantaneous. Was there time for her life to flash before her eyes? Was I there? Was Jake? And she promised. I remembered she promised to be continued, but I knew too that she was driving north when she died, toward Nashville, toward Jake. Maybe it hadn't meant anything to her. Had been nothing more than another grand impulsivity, and as Hank stood in the doorway, I just looked past him, looking across the too quiet dorm circle, wondering if it had mattered to her. And I can only tell myself that, of course, yes, she had promised to be continued. He's still over here, being like, I can't believe she's dead and I didn't get to have sex with her. She promised, though. Miles. Following that, Miles is dreaming about Alaska naked, visiting him in dreamland, though she turns into a corpse, falls onto him, and he wakes up terrified. Miles is just over here thinking about all of the pain that he's experiencing because of her death, all of the blue balls. 4 days after, Chip comes wandering into the room, freezing, climbs into bed with Miles because he's been walking for ages until he got too cold and then turned back. He blames himself for Alaska's death because he was just sick of her being moody for no reason. 6 days after, at the funeral, Miles was expecting to see her one more time, but he doesn't. It's closed casket. He tells Chip that he loves her, present tense. 7 days after, Chip and Miles are hanging out, distracting themselves, told that they can go through Alaska's things in case there was anything that she wouldn't want her aunt to find, since her aunt was coming over to get her belongings soon. Going through her things, Miles goes through her panty drawer looking for sex toys or anything. This freaking creep. Considering how kind of obsessed he is with not having had sex with her, the fact that he's going through her panties looking for sex toys is... It's weird, Miles. It's weird. Also, he grabs the condoms that he knew that she kept for Jake's visit. Next time he sees... Why didn't Jake go through her belongings? That's her boyfriend. At this point, I'm kind of just like, I wish that there had actually been a relationship shown as it had grown between Alaska and Miles, but for me, I didn't feel like it was actually time spent there. So that felt like really out of place for how intimate Miles was being, other than him being thirsty. The two of them pick up her favorite book, The General in His Labyrinth, and find notes in the margins of, how will I ever get out of this labyrinth? And she wrote, straight and fast. The two of them argue about whether that is a suicide comment, and then blame themselves, saying that she wouldn't kill herself over her own guilt and be upset. She told Miles to be continued. Clearly, she did not plan to die, at least that night. 8 days after, in world religion class, the teacher says the questions of the afterlife is more relevant than ever before now because Alaska died. Yes, let's write her into the lesson plan / final. Quote, I have here Alaska's final. You'll recall that you were asked what the most important question facing people is and how the 3 traditions we're studying this year address the question. This was Alaska's question. With a sigh, he grabbed hold of his chair and lifted himself out of it, then wrote on the blackboard, how will we ever get out of the labyrinth of suffering? AY. I'm going to leave that up for the rest of the semester, because everybody who has ever lost their way in life has felt a nagging insistence of that question. At some point, we all look up and realize that we are lost in a maze, and I don't want us to forget Alaska. I don't want to forget that even when the materials that we study seem boring, we're trying to understand how people have answered that question, and the questions each of you posed in your papers. How different traditions have come to terms with what Chip, in his final, called people's rotten lots in lives. 9 days after, Chip saying that she might have been upset for kissing Miles, or she was gonna go break up with her boyfriend. They don't know. Miles is upset by the combo, but can't afford to lose Chip, so he's just like, whatever, I don't want to talk about this. 13 days after, Chip and Miles go to the cops to ask what they saw at the car accident. Chip is so edgy that he's smoking in front of the cops, and the cops just let him even after questioning his age and getting lip. They find out that she had white tulips in her car, and she might have been on her way to her boyfriend's place, and that she very likely killed herself. Miles wants to give up on this. Chip convinces him to look into the why she might have killed herself. 14 days after, Chip and Miles go down a list of signs if someone is suicidal and then reason with each other whether they described Alaska or not, and Chip wants to keep saying that she didn't commit suicide. Someone else in class claims that Alaska visited her as a ghost, and Chip is swearing at her for it. 20 days after. Now at a restaurant, Chip is talking about how he and Miles need to go talk to Jake to figure out what was going on with Alaska. Miles doesn't want to go and hear about Jake's relationship with Alaska because it's going to make him jealous, and so then he fights with Chip on it. Chip calls Miles basically a pathetic loser, obsessed with the fantasy that Alaska was going to run away with him, but she wasn't. She kissed a bunch of boys and she didn't care about him, and Miles just walks out of the situation where she killed herself. Miles says, "Fuck you," and walks off to throw furniture around on his own. Miles is really pathetic, to be honest. He did not form a specific relationship. Chip is right. Alaska was some sort of mystical something girl that he couldn't actually have, that he is fantasizing about after her death for not having had her, and just, bro. Quote, "I screamed because he was right, for I did want to believe that I had a secret affair with Alaska. Did she love me? Would she have left Jake for me? Or was it just another impulsive Alaska moment? I was not enough to be the last guy that she kissed. I wanted to be the last one that she loved, and I knew that I wasn't. I knew it, and I hated her for it. I hated her for caring. I hated her for not caring about me. I hated her for leaving that night, and I hated myself too. Not only because I let her go, but because if I had been through enough for her, she wouldn't have even wanted to leave. She would have just lain with me and talked and cried, and I would have listened and kissed her at her tears as they pooled in her eyes." He then goes over how Alaska made him different. Quote, "As I sat on the concrete, my feet dangling toward the water, she overturned rocks with a stick and pointed out at the skittering crawfish. 'You boil 'em and then suck the heads out,' she said excitedly. 'That's where all the good stuff is, the heads.' She taught me everything I knew about crawfish and kissing and pink wine and poetry. I lit a cigarette and spit into the creek. 'You can't just make me different then leave,' I said out loud to her. Because I was fine before Alaska. I was fine with just me and the last words and school friends, and then you can't just make me a different and then die. You can't just make me different and then die." For she embodied the great perhaps. She had proved to me that she was worth it, to leave behind my minor life for grander maybes, and now she was gone, and with her my faith in perhaps. I could call everything the Colonel said and did fine. I could try to pretend that I didn't care anymore, but it could never be true again. You couldn't just make yourself matter and then die, Alaska, because now I am irretrievably different, and I am sorry that I let you go, yes, but you made the choice. You left me perhapsless, stuck in your own goddamn labyrinth, and now I don't even know what to do. And I don't even know if you chose the fast and straight way out, if you left me like this on purpose. And so I never knew you, did I? I can't remember because I never knew." I wish that we had actually gotten to see him build this relationship with Alaska, because we didn't. And after 70% of this book and he is sobbing like this, it feels so over the top because he's like, "You changed me." But where? We didn't get to see you change. All we saw is him start smoking and then did a prank once with the crew, but he was left out from Chip and Alaska doing stuff. So we didn't really get to see his character change. So he makes up with Chip so they can go and talk to Jake, but talking to Jake has been pushed back. 21 days after the event, sitting in religion class, Miles thinks about a story in Islam where a woman burned down heaven and hell so that people would follow God, not in fear or reward, but because he is God. Miles agrees that heaven and hell should have nothing to do with whether you believe or not, though he doesn't run around with gas to make that point, because you can't burn up made-up places. He then meets Takumi for McDonald's, and Takumi says that Laura wants to know if he and her are still a thing. Miles says that they've been ignoring each other, so he thought that it was over. Then it's complicated, so it's probably over. No, Miles, you have been ignoring Laura, as you have been mourning and thinking about having sex with this dead girl you didn't get a chance with. And you cheated on her with your game of Truth or Dare. Just so you know, that's also never resolved. They never talk about that. 27 days after, they make a plan to go and get drunk and steal Eagle's breathalyzer to see just how drunk that they think Alaska might have been when she wasted herself. So they get alcohol from Takumi, get the breathalyzer, and then Chip is chugging alcohol late at night. Eagle sees the light on and pays them a visit. Miles lights up a cigarette, telling Chip to cry to cover the smell of alcohol, so he sobbed between his legs. Miles gets a jury date and a warning for smoking inside / smoking period. But he gets to keep the cigarettes. Eagle doesn't confiscate those, even though he gets the jury date for having cigarettes. Day 28, 28 days after, he goes to Latin class and doesn't care, gets some hours of service from jury duty, and then meets up with Chip. Chip decides that they need to go and call Jake. They all agree, but also say that information should be kept on a need-to-know basis to understand what Alaska was doing. 29 days after, reveals that Alaska and Jake just had their anniversary, and he called it exactly 3 whatever a.m. to say happy anniversary to her, and then she randomly started freaking out. She hung up, telling Jake that she would talk to him later, and the boys are like, that's future plans. Means it wasn't suicide. The boys determined that they need to read the mind of a dead person now in order to find out why Alaska died. 37 days after, run into Laura in the hall and she cries and says nothing. He thinks about how he really doesn't care about her. He only cared about Alaska and what happened to her, and that's all that matters. This is almost 3 weeks after somebody else was like, hey, so Laura's been asking about you, and he's like, I don't know, we've been avoiding each other. She has clearly not been avoiding you, Miles. You've been avoiding her. 45 days after, the group goes to buy cigarettes. Legit, no one is having any problem with this or getting arrested. It's just like they go to the gas station and buy cigarettes without IDs. At least have a guy standing outside selling cigarettes to the kids. Come on. 46 days after, Takumi guilts Miles into talking to Laura again. He apologizes and says that he was avoiding her because he felt like he was cheating because he loved Alaska. And Laura says that she also loved Alaska. They make up and then go and smoke cigarettes at the lake with Takumi and Chip. So, like, if we're going to pretend that there is anything that's LGBT in this book, that would be the moment, because there is a vague implication of love, but it doesn't tell you if it was like sisterly love or if it was romantic love or what kind of love that was. Just that Laura also loved her. But that's the closest. So I don't understand the ding for LGBT content unless it was made up by either the ALA or parents. They continue a round of questions about suicide, saying that she couldn't have been suicidal because how could she have known that the cops would have been there for her to crash the car into or even aim there when she was as drunk as she was. They also say that she never talked about wanting to die, but she literally did. They just kept pretending that she didn't. Like, she even said she smoked specifically to die. They're so determined that they're stuck in this mindset. 51 days after, this means that Miles is now paying attention to school again, so he's talking about world religion class via enlightenment. Quote, a koan is like a riddle that's supposed to help you toward enlightenment in Zen Buddhism. For my answer, I wrote about this guy, Banzan. He was walking through the market one day when he overheard someone ask a butcher for the best piece of meat. The butcher answered, everything in my shop is the best. You cannot find a piece of meat that is not the best. Upon hearing this, Banzan realized that there is no best and no worst, that those judgments have no real meaning because there is only what is, and poof. And he reached enlightenment. And the teacher talks about Zen, quote, everything that comes together falls apart, the old man said. Everything. The chair I'm sitting on, it was built, and so it will fall apart. I'm gonna fall apart, probably before this chair. And you're gonna fall apart. The cells and organs and systems that make you, you. They came together, they grew together, and so they must fall apart. The Buddha knew one thing science didn't prove for millennia after his death. Entropy increases. Things fall apart. We're all going, I thought, and it applies to the turtles and turtlenecks, Alaska the girl and Alaska the place, because nothing can last, not even the earth itself. The Buddha said that suffering was caused by desire. We'd learned that the cessation of desire meant the cessation of suffering. When you stopped wishing things wouldn't fall apart, you stopped suffering when they did. Someday, no one will remember that she ever existed, I wrote in my notebook, and then, or that I did. Because memories fall apart too, and then you're left with nothing. Left not even with a ghost, but with its shadow. In the beginning, she had haunted me, haunted my dreams, and even now, just weeks later, she was slipping away, falling apart in my memories and everyone else's, dying again. Seemingly, Miles is bothered that just before she died, she didn't tell Jake that she was kissing him and his false hope to be with her. Quote, the colonel had driven the investigation from the start. Who had cared about what happened to her? Only when I cared if she loved me. Had given up on it, answerless, and I didn't like what answers I had. She hadn't even cared enough about what happened between us to tell Jake. Instead, she had just talked cute with him, giving him no reason to think that minutes before I'd tasted her boozy breath, and then something invisible snapped inside of her, and that which had come together commenced to fall apart. 3 months, 2 months later, he's still just like, I can't believe she didn't tell her boyfriend that she was kissing me while she was drunk just before she died. It's like the longer it goes on, just the shallower it is. You had something here. Like, what is this? 62 days after, Miles calls home and talks to his mom about nothing important, sees a doodle on the payphone table, remembers Alaska had said just doodling when she was on the phone before she freaked out, and this leads Miles to go on a new chase. 69 days after, the school wants to build a park in honor of Alaska. Why? I'm not sure. She drunk drove into the side of a cop car and died. Like, I just don't understand why she is so important that they're going to build a whole park to her. She was almost expelled for bad behavior. Am I out of line here? Her group of friends think that it's better to start an annual Alaska Young Memorial prank, and they're going to go and do it with the senior prank that she was planning called Subverting the Patriarchal Paradigm. Sounds hilarious. 83 days after, it teases that they're going to do the prank, but it doesn't tell you what it is. I hate it when authors do this. It doesn't really work. You're purposefully clipping scenes and hiding things, and I get it that you're avoiding repetition, but then you lose the relationship that you've built with the reader by cutting too much, and then it looks cheap. Just skip to the moment when they're doing the prank because we know they're going to do the prank. And then you don't have the repetition, and you also don't have the hiding. 84 days after, there is now a speaker day, and Miles wants to convince them that Dr. William Morse should be allowed to be a speaker. He is described as a friend of my dad's and a preeminent scholar in the deviant sexualities of adolescence. Why would Eagle be okay with this? And who exactly is Eagle? Is he a resident advisor? Is he a principal? Is he a dean? Like, it never really is clear what his position is, but he lives on campus and like manages the living facilities when they need something, but also he's the one doing the speaker. It's just, I didn't really understand what Eagle was supposed to be. Miles tells Eagle that Williams is interested in how teens understand sexuality. Again, I'm not entirely sure why Eagle would be like, heck yes on this, especially when somebody like Miles, who was hanging out with Alaska, and Chip were doing this, when obviously they're troublemakers. When they get this set up, it's actually Miles's dad pretending to be someone else over the phone, doesn't recognize the name or the number, and doesn't do any background research on this supposed doctor guy. Apparently, his credentials and basic identity check don't matter. The scam works and Eagle is impressed. Again, no background check on this guy, period. How did they get Miles's dad in on this? It's not actually explained how they explained this to him, his dad. He just is suddenly doing it. 102 days after, it turns out the group called around for a male stripper that would actually agree to do this thing. Quote, my father played Dr. William Morse on the phone, but the man playing him in real life went by the name Mac with 2 X, except that his name was actually Stan, except on speaker day, his name was obviously Dr. William Morse. He was a veritable existence identity crisis, a male stripper with more aliases than a covert CIA agent. The first 4 agencies the colonel called turned us down. It wasn't until we got to the B's in the entertainment section of the Yellow Pages that we found a bachelorette parties are us. The owner of the aforementioned establishment liked the idea a great deal. He said, Max is gonna love that, but no nudity. Not in front of the kids. We agreed, with some reluctance. I mean, good, because with some reluctance, you're about to get this guy a sex crime for life on his record for doing this in front of children. At a school, no less. Chip is super stressed out the day of the event because the stripper is late, and they're like, we did everything for him. What the frick? All we need is for him to show up. It's just that easy. Bro, I would not blame the stripper if he just didn't show up, because this is a sex offender status crime. If the agency didn't stop him, like, I cannot believe that Max didn't stop himself. However, their freaking out is for naught, because he does show up and he's happy to do the job, thinks it's funny, wishes that he had done it when he was in school. He starts lecturing about how boys comment on girls' racks, but girls call boys cute, which shows the obvious objectification of girls. Laura stands up and calls him a hot dude, and then he says that this is a case study of a female objectifying a man. He then rips off his clothing, revealing a tight leather underwear, and then starts strip dancing. The stripper is stopped, taken out, and speaker day continues. Eagle knows that it was them, visits them in their room, and only says, don't do it again, with a smile as he walks out. How this is the ending, I don't know. That shouldn't have gone like that. 114 days after, now they randomly come up with how she was freaking out because it was her mom's death's anniversary and she forgot, so she rushed out to the grave in the middle of the night with a bunch of flowers so that she could make it up, and then tried to make it past the cops, and she messed up so much that she rammed into the car. It was so dumb. Like, this came out of nowhere just to like clean up the story and be like, well, we're getting to the end now, so here we go. 118 days after, they all take a car and then drive down the highway that she died on, and then they're like, oh my gosh, we are still alive. We have passed where she died. 119 days after, return to school studying hard so that they can pass the semester. Since they can't get to the bottom of anything anymore, Alaska is just gone. They have to accept it. 121 days after, World Religions Finals, Mr. Hyde, now being called the Old Man, explains the final requirement, and Miles opines, quote, "But about the 3 traditions that we've studied this year, I'd like to say one thing. Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism each have founding figures, Muhammad, Jesus, and Buddha, respectively. And in thinking about these founder figures, I believe that we must finally conclude that each brought a message of radical hope. To 7th century Arabia, Muhammad brought the promise that anyone could find fulfillment and everlasting life through the alliance to the one true God. Buddha held out hope that suffering could be transcended. Jesus brought the message that the last shall be first, that even the tax collectors and lepers, the outcasts, had cause for hope. And so that is the question that I leave you with in this final. What is your cause for hope?" Back in the dorm room, the boys talk about escaping the labyrinth, and Chip says that he would rather stay in it. 136 days after, Miles opens a letter left by Takumi saying that Takumi is going back to Japan and that he helped Alaska get the flowers the night that she died. He didn't know what she wanted them for and figured that she'd go off and cry and visit her mother's grave in the morning, not drive off right then, and then he heard the car and let her go. Miles runs into Takumi's room to talk to him, but he's already gone. He returns to his room and sets the letter down for Chip, and then writes his closing essay that he still owes for the world religion class. It's pretty much the final day of the semester, but he ends it by saying he has hope. Quote, "Those awful things are survivable because we are indestructible as we believe ourselves to be. When adults say teenagers think that they're invincible with that sly, stupid smile on their faces, they don't know how right they are. We need never be hopeless because we can never be irreparably broken. We think that we are invincible because we are. We cannot be born and we cannot die. Like all energy, we can only change shapes and sizes and manifestations. They forget that when they get old. They get scared of losing and failing, but that part of us is greater than the sum of our parts, cannot begin and cannot end, and so it cannot fail. I know that she forgives me, just as I forgive her." Thomas Edison's last words were, "It's very beautiful over there. I don't know where there is, but I believe it's somewhere, and I hope it's beautiful." At the very least of everything else with this book and with these lists from the ALAs, I give this book a lot of credit for it being one of the few books that actually ends with hope, because like every other book on this list so far, on these 2 lists, because we've had 2, have been like hopeless, have been like, you're screwed, no good luck for you, but like maybe if you try to spend your life suffering, you might someday give a better life to somebody who's not alive now. I also give the author props for not demonizing religion and just allowing the character to be interested, because in a lot of books, when religion is introduced as something that is looked at into the books, they are very disrespectful about it, and so I appreciated how the author approached it in this book. Now, overall, the book had a general okay flow for me. It wasn't like super painful to go through. It was just like a lot of inane things that didn't actually connect. And then when Alaska finally died, you've got all of these feelings from Miles that don't feel justified because his relationship with her never changed. I've also been hoping earlier on that the mythology with the labyrinth would have actually come into like looking for Alaska, because as I got to the end and I'm sitting here like looking at the title of Looking for Alaska, they never went looking for Alaska. And I get it was like, well, they were looking for whether she was suffering for how she got in and out of the labyrinth. But like, especially the way that it just sort of cleared it up at the end and we're like, she was drunk and was maybe gonna go see her mom. I don't know. We just have to let it go. It felt like such a cop-out for what the book's name actually was, for what this book felt like it was supposed to be about. The time skipping seemed really awkward, and it just seemed like it was there specifically to lead up to the event so that it could be like, and pow, it happened. And like, maybe if previously time was spent building the relationship between Alaska and Miles, it would have justified the timing. But I think that this book could have started with like a meaningful day between Alaska and this guy, and then the inciting incident could have been her suicide or the death, and the book could have actually been about looking for Alaska or trying to find her in places, and actually the reader slowly discovering the character through Miles over like reviewing his relationship with her and all of these events and looking for her in his daily life to try to solve these riddles of like what happened and who she was and where she came from, and learning all these things about her post-mortem that he didn't know about her when she was alive, or that he hadn't been paying attention to when she was alive. And because we didn't have that build, we had like the long slow burn of that 100 whatever days, but because we didn't actually see that build, it would have been more efficient to just start with the inciting incident and then move on from there, because we don't have a reason to start all the way back when it doesn't build the characters. Because of that, there felt like there was so much filler content. And then it's even more weird when he's just reflecting on how much he wanted to have sex with her, but he didn't get the chance to have sex with her before she died, and that's like all he can think about while everybody else is mourning. It would have actually made Alaska's character strong to have her be more elusive, or to be looking back on her after she'd already died. As for the stuff that's listed on the ALA, there was just the blowjob/porn descriptions, the strippers suggested suicide, and the main character smoking and drinking in high school. Those were all things that I would think are potentially objectionable by parents, more so than LGBT content, when there's no LGBT content in this book. Like, the whole stripper prank is just like, if nothing had taken me out of it so far, one, that prank was pointless. It didn't do anything. It didn't add to anything. It didn't change anything. There was barely any planning on it. It just sort of happened as like, here's a thing. And then two, it's a sex crime. Like, I'm sorry, Max, you're gonna get a record for that. That kind of just like took me out. It's not funny. But maybe that's just me. Maybe I accept it could just be me, but that's what I saw. So that was Looking for Alaska by John Green. The book tied for number 5 on the ALA's 2022 Banned and Most Challenged book list. Have you read it? Will you read it? Let me know your thoughts down on the story in the comments below. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?